The United States of America and the West is collapsing. I am going to be giving my thoughts and my opinions on why I believe this is happening. And I know it's kind of ironic when I'm wearing a American flag on my hat, but thought it was fitting for the first one. I'm going to be talking about many different reasons why I believe this is happening. But first, I wanted just to give kind of a background on why societies themselves collapse and a little bit more of my perspective and what I've learned from history and from people much smarter than myself who understand history and can piece it all together. But many people believe that we're in the fourth turning right now. And if you don't know what turnings are, The Fourth Turning is a great book. I had another video about that. You can look on my channel. But turnings are, and there's four turnings, and so the fourth turning is the last turning, are basically like 20 to 22, 25 year periods where if you think about the evolution of human beings and generations of people, you get to about 20, 25, and that's when most people start to have kids, right? So you have one generation, and then that turns into the second generation, and then they turn 20, then they have a third generation, they turn 20, fourth generation. Well, the reason why we go through four turnings and not five is because about 80 years passes between the first and the fourth turning. So that 80 to 85, 90 years is an important number because what happens to the first generation by the time the last generation is being born or at least coming into their age of their own? This would be like your great-grandparents. Most people don't have a relationship or didn't have a relationship with their great-grandparents because they weren't alive at the time, right? So they died before they could impart their wisdom on the generations that are living the fourth generation after that, right? So you have this gap in knowledge. And why is this relevant? Well, if you think about four generations prior, they went through the Great Depression. So they understood these really hard times, and they understood a lot of the reasons why we went into the Depression. They also saw us getting out of the Depression. So they have a lot of knowledge and wisdom behind that, but they're not able to impart that on their great-grandchildren or just people in general who are in society around because they're gone, right? Now, we have a different way of imparting information is through history books and through word of mouth, and we teach other people. But in regard to the masses, if it's not, what's the saying? Out of sight, out of mind, right? So it's like if it's not in the constant conversation, people aren't going to pay attention, and especially now. That's why I kind of believe that although history tends to follow for the fourth turning generation, the four turnings and these cycles, the saculum as they call it, I think that this one could be different. And again, I'm going to give some reasons why, and it's going to be many, many reasons. Some of them will be funny, some of them will be short, some of them will be more serious like this one. But I think that this could be different because of the advent of technology like the internet, and especially things like social media, where our attention is gripped by certain things, and it is so quick, it's so fast. News is not at the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news, it's every second of the day. So your attention is always on, and our attention span has gone down relatively, it's very, very low because we're constantly being stimulated with something new, versus even having to wait for the 10 o'clock news every single day. That 24-hour period allowed us to, think and do other things and have projects that lasted past time, whereas now it's one thing after the next. So I feel like it could be a little bit different for this next wave, but societies in general tend to follow that saculum, and they tend to not necessarily fall. Like we didn't fall after the Great Depression, right? We went through a Great Depression and we were able to rise back again. But I believe that the West is actually collapsing before our eyes. It's falling. And I mean the society. I don't necessarily mean the wealth. So we could still have tons of wealth. We could still have tons of influence around the world. But I mean as the society of Western culture, where you have countries like the United States and Canada and Europe and lots of places where we have these ideals of a lot of freedom, a lot of openness, a lot of exchange of ideas. And I think that what is going to be different about this collapse and versus the past is because our actual framework of society, meaning the things that bring us together as a people, when we can say the West, I say the West as a overbearing thing, like I said, USA, Canada, Europe, those types of places, I think that that's being fragmented and torn apart, possibly because of the internet and possibly because of social media showing people how different we are, when I actually believe that we're much more similar than we're making it out to believe. So we're kind of tearing each other apart for no reason. Even though we have a lot in common, we're kind of emphasizing the differences between people, even the differences within yourself, which is kind of weird. And that might be one of my reasons why we're collapsing, is because we don't even know ourselves, never mind our brother, our neighbor, our community, people in different cities, different states. I feel like we're just getting fragmented on every different level, even down to the person inside of us. So the internet kind of helps push that, but I feel like that fragmentation isn't going to be turned around like it did in the Great Depression. So something could happen. And I think usually what brings people together are crises, right? They talk about that fourth turning. It culminates with a crisis. Everybody comes together, meaning everyone has to come together because it's a war or there's some crazy event, and everyone literally has to work on the same sort of project together. We have to get our act together and focus on one singular thing. I don't know if something like that's going to happen to us in the West, or especially in the United States. But even if it did, I just still don't see us, because of the fragmentation, because of the emphasizing of the differences. I don't know how we're going to piece things back together and allow for us to live in a well-mannered or a sane society. I feel like we're going to have lots and lots of mental problems, mental health problems, physical problems. We have a ton of physical problems. I've talked about that on other videos. Obesity epidemic. I feel like there's going to be more and more of those issues. And yes, this country might have wealth, but I feel like the family will continue to be pulled apart. I believe that relationships themselves, even just between two people, whether you're straight, gay, it doesn't matter, those things are going to be more and more fragmented and pulled apart. Relationships between the government and people, corporations and people, their own businesses, and the employees. I feel like that is going to continue to get more and more weird, especially with more technological advances that get people out of the workforce. And we have now a bunch of people that aren't really doing anything, right? They don't have a societal need that they can fill. So it's going to get even weirder and confusing. Again, I'm kind of talking about lots of different reasons, but the main general feeling that I have, and a lot of other historians have talked about the fourth turning, I believe Neil Howe and William Strauss, I might be mixing up their names, but they're talking about these four turnings, and we're in the fourth turning, and they always talk about, it's going to culminate with the climax, and then people come together, and then we kind of restart again with the first turning. And I think it's possible, but I don't know if we would be able to, again, bring things back together to some level of normalcy. I just feel like, especially with what's happened because of the pandemic, normalcy is not going to return, and I don't know what that looks like for the West. And I know, as a human being and someone who is greatly affected by technology, I am not the type of person that, although I'm posting this online, I'm not the type of person that can easily get involved in things like social media without it affecting me in a negative way. Doesn't matter what it is, however it is that I engage with it, it always ends up draining my energy or taking life force out of me. And some part of the population, it's the exact opposite, and they actually get fueled up by it. But it's here to stay, is what I'm saying. These things are here to stay. So as a human being, some people can benefit from it, but a lot of people aren't, and they won't be able to. And that's like that with every type of introduction of new pieces of technology. You gotta kind of live with it, but I don't know what it's going to mean for, again, community, society, individuals, like we talked about with mental health, with physical health. And I think that if we don't come to some sort of crisis that really, I'm talking really forces us to get real with ourselves, with each other, it's going to get weirder and weirder. I like to compare us, people talk about 1984 in that book. I think we're headed more towards something like Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World. And that's what I see us more turning into, more of a society that just kind of doesn't really care. We're highly medicated, we're pleasure centric. And I don't believe that is healthy for societies. Yes, you could say that society is going to thrive because maybe certain people have wealth and we don't, die of simple diseases like people do out in the bush or something. But I feel like as a human being, the things that we need for society, family, relationships, community, all of these things, I feel like that is going to be continually ripped apart, and it's going to be very, very hard to get us back together. So wanted to give just a quick introduction about kind of where my brain is at when I think about things like the fourth turning and where we're at today and where we're going to go, even if we have some big crisis, and how we're going to be able to deal with that. But I'm going to be adding many more videos about why I believe that America and the West is collapsing. And again, when I say collapse, I don't mean everything's going to just completely fall to ashes and people are going to be murdering each other in the streets, although that might be a possibility. I don't necessarily think that's happening. I feel like it's collapsing right before our eyes. And although it might be the best time in history for certain aspects of us in regard to access to food and shelter and all these different things, I feel like as a human being, we need more than that. We need, again, this connection. We need this significance. We need some of these other aspects of our personality have needs that aren't being met by just technology and by food and by shelter and by the basic necessities of life. I feel like there's more than that. There's more needs than just the primal instincts like an animal. We're humans. We're not animals. We're humans. We might have animal tendencies, but we're human beings, and we're more complicated than that. We're more messy. We're more sticky. That's kind of why we're in the situation that we're in, right? But I feel like if we put our heads together, we can figure these things out. And I think many, many people are starting to understand what that is. We'll talk about more of that as we go. But again, this is just an introduction video of why I believe that America and the West is collapsing. It's not a positive thing, and I try to be positive, but I'm just speaking my mind and what I see and giving my perspective. And that's it for today. So I'll be continuing along with this on more episodes. Who knows when I'll post it, but look for that when it comes. And until I see you then, have a good